Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Sisters of the Strange. I'm Shay.
And I'm Landry. I don't know. And this week, never know where we're going with that.
My brain paused. I don't know. I was buffering.
This week, I wanted to throw a few things that are normally at the end of the episode into the beginning of the episode. So we've only had one person send us a ghost story, and I've kind of been waiting to even share that because one of our goals is to either be able to throw some in at the end of episodes or have whole entire episodes related to listener stories. And so if you have a ghost story, do not hesitate to send it to us at sistersofthestrangepodcast@gmail.com.
Or if you know a murderer.
Yes, I actually have that in here as well. It's literally right after that. It's if you have any recommendations on murders, haunted places, haunted things, lore, any of the good stuff that you want us to research and give an episode over, send it to our email or message it to us on any of our socials and we'll add it to our list.
Yes.
Yes. And then
I love that personally.
Yeah, because we already have a list compiled between us, but if it's something that multiple people are like, hey, I want this. Like if multiple people said Hatman or multiple people said, Ted Bundy, like we would throw it closer to the beginning rather than where we might have it in our lineup. So definitely don't hesitate to send us what you're wanting to hear. It'll make it better for you.
We take it all into account.
Yeah, we love it. We love it. And then we did have more last week, but we ask people at the end of every episode to leave an emoji, and we normally say what emoji we want left or, something that's on brand. So thank you to the people who did that. But we want more people to leave emojis in the comments so that one of our goals was to interact more with our people. And that emoji lets us interact more with you.
Oh, yeah. We interacted a lot this week, actually.
Yeah. We
based
got
on
a
the
lot
last
more.
episode.
Yeah.
Which was super fun.
Goals. Yeah.
Loved it.
It was really nice. It was cool to see, we set that goal of 5 reels, TikToks, whatever. We set that goal per episode and your episode got a ton of views, I think really based off of that. So,
incredible.
And then wherever you're listening, be sure to like and subscribe, all of the good stuff so that, people will follow and watch, because I know me personally, whenever it comes to looking for a new podcast or a new thing to listen to or a new thing to watch, I generally don't do it if they don't have a lineup of episodes or the backing of people likes and followers and things like that. I normally won't even look their way because I'm like, well, they're clearly not that good if they've got, 10 episodes and 3 people. I don't know. It's me. I'm that person. And I know a lot of people are that way as well. I know you had a friend who wouldn't listen to us until we had a...
Yeah, I've had a couple people who are like, now that you finally have 11 episodes or whatever, a backlog, I'm going through and binging.
Yeah.
Which I love.
Yeah. So make sure you kind of help us get out there a little bit. We're already out there and we're doing good with growth.
But we still have to shove it down your throats anyway.
Yeah. I just want to reiterate, get it out there.
Also, to bounce off of that, if you're here from TikTok, go follow us on Instagram just in case we lose TikTok this weekend. Because it's supposed to be the 17th or the 19th or something like that.
I'm not sure.
It's supposed to be the last day, apparently, the apocalypse of TikTok. So if you're here from TikTok, go follow us on Instagram. We'll post our reels and stuff there as well and keep that going. I just really sad because we've done really well on TikTok.
I know TikTok is what I feel like has really helped us get out there, but we do post everything that we post on TikTok on our Instagram, and I normally put it on YouTube as YouTube Shorts as well. YouTube is a little bit less than I do on Instagram, but still, it will be there. Especially if TikTok goes away, we will push those 2 things way heavily.
Yeah.
And then we've also discussed doing some sort of little giveaway.
Yes.
So I would love some ideas. We would love some ideas on what people would like to receive. Clearly a shirt that has some sort of our logo, maybe a blanket, maybe some stickers, maybe a poster. What would you like to receive as a giveaway? That's something you would utilize and not something that would just be oh, they did a giveaway and I'm happy I got this, but it's going to be a shelf item.
Now it's living in my junk drawer.
Yeah, I don't want to spend our money on
something unuseful.
Yeah, something that isn't useful. And I'm the same way anytime I want to give away and do something fun. In that process, we haven't even made shirts for ourselves. So I designed some shirts for us, which I have, but I want to order us some shirts as well so that we can start wearing them.
Fun.
I know. And then something I was saying to Shay whenever I walked in to start recording today is I think it's hilarious because you just mentioned that TikTok that said what did it say about the being an influencer because we're going to create a new platform?
Oh, yeah. It said thank God TikTok is going away because that gives us a chance to start all over on a new app to become a better influencer or something like that.
Yeah. So I thought it was funny that she said that because on the way here, I was literally thinking man, I've always been scared to put myself out there on social media because I'm scared of it's not even the people that I don't know. That's not what bothers me. It's the people I do know being judgy. And like the people we went to school with being super judgmental. That's always scared me. So I've always been scared to put myself out there. But for whatever reason on this platform, I don't care. Like it doesn't scare me. I've seen multiple
it feels
people.
Good.
Yeah, it doesn't freak me out. And like I always wanted to do kind of like lifestyle content, but I was too scared. And quite frankly, I live a pretty boring life. I'm like, I work from home doing a 9 to 5 and raise a 14-year-old nephew. And my husband works out of town. Like it's pretty boring. But that's always what I wanted to do. And I was always scared of people judging me. And the last few weeks, I've seen like people who we went to school with looking at our content. Because, you know, on TikTok, you can see the foot marks. Yeah. And I'm like, normally that would really freak me out. And right now I'm kind of like, doesn't scare me at all, which is crazy.
It's cool.
I like it.
Yeah.
I like that my confidence is there. It makes me feel good that I feel good about what we're doing.
Confidence is key.
Yeah. But I'm still like very surprised that it does not freak me out a lot more.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad.
Yeah.
I wanted to say one more thing. I just wanted to throw out there that if you live in California or are being affected by the wildfires that are going on right now in California, we're thinking about you. I've been praying about California. It's really sad to see just the damage that is done and really sad. And thank the first responders and the firefighters who are out there 24 hours a day, just risking their lives to save people's homes and their livelihood, all of that. I think it's great that there's so many first responders out there and that they're doing everything they can. But we're thinking about you and we're here for you. So if you've been affected by that.
Yeah, I wish we had a bigger platform to where we could do more for that. But I think at this point in time, it's just got to be like prayers from us. I think that's all we have to offer. Maybe if we could find a link to share for donations, we can maybe post a few links or something like that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I just want that to be known.
But yeah.
I think that's it for our beginning yap.
Yeah, our little yappy yaps.
Yep.
We can get into this week's episode. So this week I picked my episode basically loosed off of a show I've been watching. And I say loosely because the show I've been watching is time travel. And this week we were talking about time slips.
Ooh.
Yeah, so you versed up a little bit on time slips.
Yeah, I did.
So what would you say the difference between a time slip and time travel is to you?
To me, it feels like instead of you choosing that you want to go to, like, I'm going to go back to 1970 or whatever, 1800s, just hypothetical. And you go there and now you're there and you're involved in what's going on around you and you're staying there and you can explore the entirety of it if you wanted to. Time slip, I feel like, is where you basically just like accidentally find yourself in this like blip of time and you're in this other timeline, but you're not able to interact. You know what I mean? Like you're just seeing what's happening and you're there and you're like, oh, what just happened?
Yeah, where am I?
And then all of a sudden you're out. You're gone.
Yep. That's perfect. That's great. The difference between time travel and a time slip is that time travel implies deliberate, intentional movement through time, often with a method or technology involved, while a time slip is accidental, unintentional, and an unexplained journey through time. So, like you said, in simpler terms, when I think of time travel, I think of someone being like, hey, I'm going to step in my machine and I'm going to go to this time, and I'm going to hang out, and then I'm going to step back into my machine and I'm going to go home.
Hopefully.
Yes. Hopefully. And then a time slip to me is like, yeah, you're walking down the street, you look around, you're not in your time, and you're like, what in the world is going on? You take another step and now you're back in your time.
Yeah.
Like, that's how my brain thinks of it too. So you did great on that.
Woo!
Woohoo!
A+ for Shay.
Yeah. C-. I'm kidding.
Oh, damn.
Nope. A++. You did great. 2 claps.
Snaps for Shay.
Yeah. So when I was researching time slips, I was trying to find just personal encounters, time slip encounters, and I kept getting Liverpool, Bold Street in Liverpool. For whatever reason, it is a massive hotspot for time slips. And so then I was like, okay, where is this place even at? Like, clearly it's overseas. It's not here.
Yeah.
But whenever I think of overseas and like Europe, I'm like, oh, so it's got to be by London because London's the central hub, which it's not at all. London is actually so far down. But anyways, yeah. So I looked up Liverpool on a map and it is west of Manchester and northwest of London. If you look at where it is in relation to like Dublin, Ireland, and then you go west over the Irish Sea and then you land in Liverpool. So it is on, I wouldn't necessarily the city limits because like if you look it up on Google Maps, the city limits is not necessarily the same as, it's the same thing. Like here you're in Weatherford, but you're either in city limits or outside of city limits. Regardless of that, the Irish Sea runs across like the whole entire western and south side of Liverpool, basically. But it's the Irish Sea and then a river comes off of it. And so the river is basically what is running through that whole west wall of Liverpool.
Okay.
But it's coming off the sea. So it's just a bunch of water surrounding this city.
Yeah.
And so there is a ton of thoughts and theories on how water can be a conductor of energy and help with like paranormal aspects.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's believed that water can generate or amplify electromagnetic fields, which in turn increases paranormal activity. That's why people always have the little EMF reader, and they run it on the wall and it'll beep at you, which sometimes I'm totally certain that that's just the electricity of the house, but I digress off my little step stool there. So if you believe that water can be an energy source, then it's not hard to believe that it lends credit and credence to time slips being paranormal and happening from the water.
Okay.
So then I do go into some of those theories later. I'm going to line out kind of most of our stories. And then at the end of that, I have 3 categories, and each one has a couple of subcategories on what our theories are towards time slips.
Okay.
And so then at the end of all of this, so kind of keep in mind as you're listening, with each story, I kind of want to go back and be like, I think it might be this theory that explains this one the best.
Okay.
And so like for my first story, I kind of lined it out to help you understand where I'm coming from. And so water is kind of something that I believe encourages this story and how it holds residual energy and all of that fun stuff, which I'll come back to how that actually, like the science or theory of the water, but just think ahead.
Okay.
Or think while listening, I guess. I'm like, if you had a pen and paper, go for it, because
we're multitasking today, folks.
Yeah, you'll definitely need a pen and paper later.
Okay.
Like with the theories, because they get a little intense, but I tried to break them down and use as much like simple thinking as possible, because it's like quantum theory. And I'm like, okay, so let's use our little brains and work with that. Because I get confused sometimes by too many big words in one sentence.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Human brains, not Einstein brains.
Yeah, Landry brain. So with all this talk of water and its ability to generate a time slip, here's an encounter that occurred in the summer of 1993 when a man took a break from his busy day at work. He was walking down Hanover Street, just a short distance from Bold Street in Liverpool, on his way to grab a coffee at a local cafe. As he rounded the corner, headed toward the cafe, he found himself on a busy dock. Instead of the usual buildings and shops, there were large wooden warehouses and thick ropes tied to massive ships. The docks were crowded with people who looked to be wearing clothes from the 1800s. They were all busy unloading barrels and crates from ships. He continued walking down the dock, looking at the tall ships and their large sails. As he inspected his strange surroundings, he looked for any sign of modern life, but found none. He couldn't understand how he had arrived there or why he was standing on the dock from a century before. He felt no fear, just confusion. Then just as suddenly as it had all started, the scene began to fade. The sounds of the workers in the ships grew quieter, and the air felt different. Before he knew it, the man found himself standing in front of the cafe he had originally set out for. The noise of the city returned around him, and the dock with its ships and workers had vanished. He blinked, trying to adjust, and checked his watch. An hour had passed, but he couldn't understand how. It felt like the whole event only took a few minutes. He looked around, trying to make sense of it. Scene. So for this story, there's a theory on how water or time can play a part in this whole experience. And as previously listed, we'll get back to that. So for me, I think water is a huge aspect of that story because of the docks.
It's on a dock. Yeah.
Which it seems as though he wasn't even walking around a dock.
Yeah.
It seems more or less that he was walking through the city and ended up on a dock. But nonetheless, I feel like that.
Which is crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. I think I would lose my marbles.
Oh my God.
I'd be like, oh, we're just going to walk into the coffee shop now? Cool.
No. I'm immediately calling my therapist.
I don't have one, but let's figure it out. My therapist is anyone that will listen to me.
Amen.
So let me just call somebody.
I'm calling you.
Yeah, anybody. Actually, I'm recording a Snapchat video because that's how I communicate.
Yes.
I don't do phone calls. Don't call me. Don't call me. Don't FaceTime me. You can video me on Snapchat because I can listen to it when I want to, and I can respond as I feel needed.
Amen.
And sometimes I just need time to think.
Yeah.
I can't think on a phone call. So the next time slip is one that I found deeply interesting, and I would super, super, super love to experience this one. It like gives Scotland, Edinburgh vibes like everywhere. And that's me. That's who I am.
Yeah.
So I also think that this story goes back to how water and stone can hold energy, because they say limestone is like a huge conductor.
I remember that
as
from
well.
from the very first episode. You talked about it.
I don't even remember what I talked about. What was the first episode?
The one.
Oh,
where
yes, the caves.
The caves. Yeah.
Yes, I did. Good job. I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. You know what? My brain is so much sharper. It's not yet. It's getting there. It's getting there.
I have a memory like an elephant.
I do sometimes. I think the last few years I've just been, or not last few years, I think this last like 6 months, maybe a year, I've just been like floating through life. And so I haven't actually been taking anything in. Yeah. And I think no alcohol is helping that dramatically. Like I already am on a amazing sleep schedule, way better sleep schedule. And I also think my brain is coming back to me because I feel like I have not had a brain.
Less foggy. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was drinking like a lot, like weekly a lot. And so I feel like it's definitely helping.
Welcome back.
Okay. So this next story. So Ella was walking down Bold Street, enjoying the crisp air and lively atmosphere. Around her, the street was busy with people shopping, chatting, and hurrying along. As she was taking in the busy street, something strange caught her attention. The faint sound of clattering noises filled the air like a horse-drawn carriage on cobblestone. She looked around, trying to find the source, but nothing could explain that sound. The street was as modern as always, with cars parked along the sidewalks and the buzz of city life all around. Weirdly, the sound that reminded her of a horse-drawn carriage on cobblestone kept fading in and out. Curious, Ella turned her head towards the old churchyard at the corner of Bold Street and Berry Street. The churchyard, with its ancient stone walls and old gravestones, had always caught her attention, but today something seemed different. Maybe it was the odd sound, or perhaps it was just the quiet, peaceful atmosphere surrounding the old church. Either way, Ella walked towards the stone archway that marked the entrance. As she passed under the arch, everything around her seemed to shift. The noise of modern traffic and chatter faded, replaced by the sound of busy people and clattering carts. Beyond the churchyard, back on Bold Street, the buildings around her looked different. The buildings were taller and older, with faded brickwork and small, narrow windows. The street was narrower than she was used to, and the air was thick with fog. The street was lit by gas lamps, and women in long skirts walked past, with baskets in their arms. Horse-drawn carriages made their way down the street, their wheels clacking against the cobblestones. Ella blinked, trying to make sense of what was happening. She turned to look at the church, but what she saw made her pause. The church was much larger than it had looked before. It now had tall spires and a grand entrance. The stonework was much more detailed than usual, and the surrounding area had a different feel. The churchyard, once quiet and peaceful, was now part of the busy street with people walking through it. Ella took a few steps forward, wanting to explore more, but as she did, everything around her started to flicker. The busy street, the fog, the horse-drawn carts, everything began to blur together, as if the world itself was melting away. Suddenly, the scene vanished completely, and in an instant, she found herself standing once again on Bold Street. Ella looked around, feeling confused. Only a few minutes had passed, but it felt like much longer. Scene again. Yeah, so I definitely think the stone archway has a lot to do with something there and some energy. Yeah,
she walked through it.
Yeah. So this next story, this is where my theories go out the window pretty much, is like, because I already know the knowledge of the theories, right? So I've kind of alluded to some of my thoughts throughout this. I don't have thoughts really much for this one.
Okay. Like in a good way or a bad way?
Just
like you don't think you could debunk it, or you can debunk it?
This one is one of those few stories that actually like almost has proof.
Oh.
There's two that are like full on like proof, people I would really believe, just their credibility, or, you know, you'll kind of get to it at the end of this story why I would be able to, you know, with this person. The other ones are kind of like, I feel like well, actually there's like 3 stories that you can really probably get down to the science on. But anyways, I don't know. My theories are weird. The first 2 stories just have to do with water and the energy there and the stone and how that holds energy. And those are 2 things I have heard forever.
Yeah.
And so that's why my theory there is pretty easy to come to. These next few ones, I wouldn't necessarily be like, I mean, I guess you could argue that it's the whole city has stonework that's been there forever. But neither here nor there on that one.
Be so for real.
Yeah, be so for real right now. So in the mid-2000s, a young man in Liverpool was shoplifting. As the young man ran from a security guard, he took a turn down Hanover Street and then quickly into a dead-end alley called Brooks Alley. Yes.
Hanover Street again?
Again, yes. So Hanover Street and Bold Street are very close together. And I think that like most of these stories are Hanover and Bold Street.
Oh.
So there is...
I didn't catch that before. Okay.
Yeah. He took a turn down Hanover Street and then quickly into a dead-end alley called Brooks Alley. Once he was in the alley, he paused to listen for the guard, but the sound of footsteps never came. Thinking he was in the clear, he stepped back out onto Hanover Street. As he walked, something felt different. The street he had just left now seemed unfamiliar. The pavement, the buildings, and even the cars driving past seemed out of place. They looked old, as if they belonged to another time. He continued walking. He noticed the people around him were dressed in clothing he didn't recognize. His sense of confusion grew when he reached Bold Street and saw that there were new traffic lights. His mind started to race as he tried to figure out what was happening. Slowly, it dawned on him that he had somehow traveled back in time. In his panic, he remembered his cell phone. He pulled it out from his pocket, hoping to contact someone or find a signal. However, it wouldn't work. His frustration grew as he moved quickly through the streets, still unsure of where or when he was. Eventually, he spotted a small kiosk selling newspapers. He hurried over and leaned in to look at the front page of the Daily Post. The date printed clearly on the top was the 18th of May, 1967. The young man eventually found himself in front of a jewelry store. It was a familiar place from his own time, but something about it felt different now. He tried his phone again, and this time, it worked. He looked around, and suddenly everything seemed normal again. The street appeared as if it should in the present, and the strange vision of 1967 faded from view. Yet, as he stood there, he could still see people walking further down the street in the past. They wore clothing from the 1960s and moved about as though nothing had changed. It was as if the two time periods were overlapping. By now, the young man had seen enough. He quickly boarded a bus and headed home trying to make sense of the strange experience. Later, when he was interviewed by a local newspaper, he told his story without hesitation and repeating the same account several times, each time exactly how it had happened. The story didn't end there, though. The security guard who had chased him was also interviewed. The guard confirmed that when he turned into Brooks Alley in pursuit, the young man had completely vanished. He had no explanation for how this person could have disappeared. The newspaper then checked the details of the young man's story and found that everything he had described was historically accurate.
Was that the end of that one?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Do you want me to wait?
You can say something if you'd like.
Do you think that if the officer had continued to follow him down Hanover Street or
Brooks
Alley, that he would have also gone back? Like he would have gone through the same time slip?
I would hope so.
Because if he turned the corner and didn't go as far as the
man
guy did, but he was no longer there, which is crazy.
I think I would have walked in trying to inspect more.
Yeah.
But later on, there's a theory as well where it could happen to you, but it could not happen to me based on how fast we were moving at that time.
Ooh.
So say the robber is running and the security guard turns the corner running, but then doesn't see him and slows to a walk. There's a theory that could make a difference on a time slip. So we will run back to that.
Okay.
I didn't ever think about it in that point of view. So about the time and the movement,
I mean, it makes sense. It does make a little bit of sense.
Yeah. And that, like, I describe it later on as like a rubber band and I make it make more sense.
Okay.
So I go through my theories and how each one realistically would work in the real world based off like a rubber band or a black hole or gravity, things like that.
Okay.
So, but I did never connect those two dots. So that was a good connection. Never would have thought about that one. So the next story is also a very popular time slip story, probably the most popular one. I would say a lot of it is due to its credibility because it was a police officer.
Okay.
So like the last one I think is very credible. You could look it up solely because the newspapers did interview two people and they both were like, yeah, what the heck?
Yeah.
And it's two people that should not be getting along. It's like the guard was chasing him. He's a bad guy. It's not two people who are conspiring. In my opinion, I wouldn't conspire.
Yeah.
I would conspire with a friend maybe, but that doesn't seem like a friend.
Yeah. You're not going to go back to the cop and be like, hey bro, like tell him this story.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
They
after you were trying to arrest me.
No contact after that.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that story is pretty credible. I think this one is mainly just because it happened to a man who was a police officer.
Mm-hmm.
So, in 1996, Frank and his wife were out for a stroll in Liverpool's town center. His wife decided that she wanted to go and buy a book at Waterstones, the large bookstore. So they started to walk towards the area of the shop. As they approached Bold Street, Frank decided to go into another shop first, but bumped into his friend and stopped to chat in the street. A few moments later, Frank said goodbye, visited his shop, and turned back to go to meet his wife. After reaching Bold Street, he headed on towards the bookstore. As he approached, he glanced up and was surprised to see the name Cripps above the door, which is supposed to be the bookstore that says Waterstones, but it said Cripps. So he was surprised that it said Cripps and not Waterstones. As he was about to cross over to see what was going on, a van swept past him with the name Cardin's on the side. And I didn't put in here, but it looked like a van that was like an old, almost like a Jeepers Creepers van type shape. So like that genre of time.
Okay.
And it had Cardin's written on the side. So the van honked and drove past. Looking around, Frank suddenly realized that things were not quite as they should be. He looked at the cars driving past and realized they were all old-fashioned vehicles, such as people would drive back in the 50s and 60s. And then he noticed the people. Men were wearing hats and suits, while the women were dressed in headscarves, full skirts, and had post-war hairstyles. By this time, Frank was beginning to feel slightly freaked out. He carried on crossing the road and headed towards what was supposed to be the bookstore. As he got closer, he noticed in the window there were handbags, shoes, and umbrellas. Suddenly, he saw a young woman looking up at the sign. She looked confused, and she was wearing modern clothes. When she saw him approaching, she smiled at him. Frank went into the shop, closely followed by the young woman. When they entered, he was surprised and pleased to see that it had indeed turned into a bookshop. The young woman smiled, shook her head, and said, "That was strange. I thought it was a new clothing store," and then walked away, looking slightly puzzled. The story is fascinating because Frank did not hesitate to share his experience. And as a police officer, you would think he would be like
very observant
and scared to ruin his credibility.
Oh, yeah.
By being like, oh, by the way, I went back in time. Like,
yeah, they're going to think I'm crazy.
Yeah. And so it's another thing where it's like, this is credible to me because he told his story from day one. He didn't hesitate. And a lot of stories like our first episode where there was the UFO encounter type situation. Yeah. He didn't tell people for a long time because he was scared to ruin his stance and his credibility. Frank is like, no, bro, this happened.
Wow.
And I am not scared to tell you that this happened.
That's so crazy. I just cannot imagine that.
I think it's interesting because that one had someone else kind of was like,
yeah, that was
they
weird.
Did experience it with him. So maybe they were, same pace, whatever it might be with the, I talked about the time and the movement. Maybe they were moving at the same pace. So she was able to see what he saw.
Yeah.
Because she was a modern day woman as well. Okay.
I got my Valentine's Day blankie and my ghost mug. I'm ready.
It's so cute. I'm going to go buy one after this. No spending day out the window. Thank you, Aldi, for coming in clutch.
Sponsor me, Aldi.
Okay. So to follow the theme of a store that is no longer there, here's our next story.
Perfect. What a segue.
Yeah, I really tried. And then I'm not smooth with it at all. Whenever I actually typing it, I'm like, hell yeah, smooth as fuck. Saying it, I'm like,
and moving on.
Yeah, y'all have no idea how much I have to edit my episodes because I read. A lot of my stories are just me reading. And I stumble so bad. My brain is too fast for my mouth.
Yeah, something's moving too fast over there.
Yeah, it's my brain. It's like,
in an instant.
Yeah, I'm like 3 lines down and then I'm still speaking the first line.
And you're like, that doesn't make sense.
Nope, that didn't work. So, my bad.
That's okay, nobody knows.
You do now. So, a young girl had heard about a new store opening in the corner of Lord Street and Whitechapel and was excited to see what it had to offer. She decided to go there and buy some items for her sister's new baby. Upon arriving, she noticed a bright and inviting new maternity store. She entered the store and began to explore, picking up a few items for the baby, including cardigans, bibs, and gloves. The prices of the items were much lower than she had expected, which made her think that perhaps there was a special promotion. Once she had found everything she wanted, she approached the register and began to pay. She pulled out her credit card to pay, and the cashier looked at her with confusion. The cashier nicely excused herself and went to speak with the manager. When she returned, the cashier explained that the store did not accept this form of payment. The girl felt disappointed but had no other means of payment, so she left. Later, when she got home, she told her mom about what had happened. Her mother heard where the store was and seemed confused. Her mother explained that the store had closed years ago and the location was now occupied by a bank. She was certain of that because she had an account at the bank currently. The following day, the girl decided to return to the store with her mother to investigate. They went to the same location, and when they arrived, they found that the store had indeed changed from what had once been a maternity shop to a bank, just as her mother had said.
So weird, dude.
Well, I think that's one of the only stories that it doesn't seem like they jump back like a massive amount of time.
Yeah.
I feel like all my other stories is like, you're in the 2000s and you're going back to 1800 or the 50s or 60s or something like that. This one's like, oh, we're just going to send you back up 10 years.
That's so weird. I would be so confused. I would literally have to be like, why did she just be like, oh, okay, they don't take credit card or whatever? And then I would be like, what?
Well, I don't know. Because there's some places like, not all the time, but like where I live, our Wi-Fi is spotty because we're pretty far out. And so like sometimes the Family Dollar only takes cash. And some places don't take Amex. Like Mary's doesn't take Amex. And
at Brooks Alley, that he would have
she's in not our time frame, certainly. Certainly not. But yeah, there's a lot of places that I feel like randomly are like, no, cash only.
But they advertise that.
Woody's, cash only. But yes, they do.
They have, it says it on the door, cash only.
Yeah, it does.
And like Joe T's, cash only.
Yeah.
They have an ATM, you know?
Yeah, I guess.
It's just, I would be confused.
Yeah.
And have to ask. Like, I would have to like be like,
okay, so do you have an ATM?
Can you, elaborate?
What the fuck?
I have questions.
I've got to watch my language from here on out because I am so nervous that somebody from my real work, not people at my work, but clients at my day job are going to find this podcast and be like, wow, she's
super professional.
She presents herself entirely different when she's at the city hall. I got to fix that.
This is my private free time and I have freedom of speech. Thank you very much.
I know, but I don't want to reflect poorly. I am the business manager, developer. Like, that is my job, is to go. I mean, I'm also like the landscape. I'm a few different things, but
it's fine. You're just super cool outside of that.
Yeah, I'm like really cool. Honestly, most people are super cool outside. They're like mayors and stuff. I've met a few. They're pretty cool outside of
oh yeah
work.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Normally, that's our way to is we're like, so y'all want to go get some drinks, and that's how we.
Yeah, you socialize. You have a normal life outside of your job, so you are not your profession. Moving on.
I'm like, I don't know.
I literally save lives for a living, and all I talk about is dead people.
You know what? You're not wrong. Check and mate.
Mic drop.
Anyway, back to the show.
And we're back.
Yeah. We just get off.
Just a little commercial break. That's all.
Yeah. And sometimes there's just a jump where I've completely cut out half of our conversation. And it's because I'm like, nobody cares about what we were just saying, but we think it's funny.
I think it's hilarious.
But I have to shut us down sometimes. I know.
Okay.
I'm not shutting us down now. I'll just take it out later. I know there's times where you're like, I know we've talked about that. Where's it at?
I know. I'm like, what? Where was that?
Yeah.
It's okay. Most of the time I don't notice it, but sometimes I'm like,
yeah, it's in the ether. Yeah. Deleted scenes. We really need that. We need a bloopers with, we need a Patreon with bloopers. There'd be like one person watching it and it would be your mom. She'd be like, yo, they're funny as hell.
They're so funny.
My mom would be like, you're so annoying.
Shout out Georgia.
Yeah. She loves us. So there's another account where this lovely lady goes into a place that is no longer there, which is weird because you were saying something earlier about like your theory is, or your explanation is that they don't interact. And so it's really weird because actually in the, in that, the first one I told about the guy in the docks, there was a lot of mention. I just kind of took it out because there was some of it was just so much filler that I'm like, people aren't going to keep listening. It's going to get uninteresting. So I took some of the stuff out.
The bulk of the story.
Yeah, I just kept like the good parts. But he had mentioned multiple times how he kept trying to interact and no one would interact with him. Mm-hmm. Like no one noticed who he was. No one interacted. But in the last one they interacted, clearly telling her, you can't pay with that. And then in this one, she gets interacted with as well.
Okay.
So interesting little tidbit there. But there's another account where a local history teacher, Miss Calloway, ventured into a store that was not of the modern day. So Miss Calloway was on her daily stroll and she took it every day after school. Given that she took this walk every day, she would have been very familiar with her surroundings on these walks. One day, set between two buildings, she saw a small shop she had never noticed before. She walked off the usually bustling street and into the shop where time seemed to have shifted. There was an older woman dressed in garb that did not match the 1985 world that she lived in. Without much thought, Miss Calloway went in and sat at a table in the corner and noticed the walls were lined with glass jars filled with herbs and tea leaves that were all labeled in neat handwriting. The kind woman who tended the shop brought Miss Calloway a tea, and as she sipped her tea, she looked out the shop windows to see that the street no longer looked like the 1985 street she had just been on. The street that was usually busy and full of cars was now calmer and had carriages with cobblestone streets instead. As she sipped her tea and looked out the window, everything remained in that altered state. Different buildings, horse-drawn carriages, and cobblestone streets. After she finished her tea, she stepped back out of the shop and onto the bold street she was used to. When she turned around to face the shop she had just enjoyed her tea in, it was no longer there.
What?
Yeah.
And she's like, that was nice. That was lovely.
Hell yeah, brother. Walks off.
Moves on with life. No!
Yeah, I would be like knocking on the wall, looking for a lever.
Yeah.
Like, what did I just do?
I'd be going back there every single day.
Yeah, some Scooby-Doo shit. I'd be investigating, like knocking, stepping on a stone, like every stone.
Yeah.
Skipping every stone in front of that.
Left unturned.
Genuinely, I'd probably end up scaling the building because I'd be touching every stone on the building. Like, let me back in.
Yeah.
Yeah, weird shit. But that was just another thing of where it takes you back to like cobblestone streets and the horse-drawn carriages. So there's like a common theme there of everyone kind of, not everyone, but a lot of these stories round back to like the same time frame. So.
And something that's tripping me up are these last two stories about the interactions. Because in my brain, like it just doesn't seem like that would happen.
Like viable?
Like what? Yeah.
Theories can explain it a little bit.
Okay.
A little. The theories I have laid out, it's like really hard to wrap your head around.
Okay.
Some of them.
I'll try really hard.
I tried to put them all in like a simpler term to make it make sense a little bit easier, but some of them are still a little far-fetched.
Okay.
So the final story of today, before we get into time slip theories, happened to a woman named Stacy who had just moved to Liverpool. One day, her daughter was sick, so she thought walking her daughter would not only make her daughter feel better, but would help her get a better lay of the land. Stacy said that as she walked down the road, the sidewalk went from a smoothly paved road to a cobblestone road, but since she had just moved here, that did not seem odd to her, just because she didn't know those surroundings yet. As she continued her walk, she walked past an older man who was leaning along the fence in front of his cottage, smoking a pipe. They nodded at each other, and she kept on her walk. After passing the cottage, Stacy came upon a row of whitewashed cottages. On the left side of the road, there was a circle of flowers and other typical garden plants. Beside the circle of flowers, Stacy had noticed a pile of sandstone stacked up. Behind the pile of sandstone, there were more cottages, and beside them, a stable block with an archway. Further down the lane, the buildings began to change. Some were made of stone, while others were made of cheaper-looking brick. At the end of the road, Stacy noticed a little girl, dressed as if she were in Little House on the Prairie, sitting atop a gate. Stacy thought the way the girl was dressed, with a dress and button boots, was a little odd and older-fashioned, but she continued towards the little girl nonetheless. Stacy said that the girl gave her an odd look, then jumped off the gate and went inside a nearby cottage. As Stacy approached the gate, she noticed beyond it was a large and beautiful meadow. Since she had reached the end of the road, she decided to turn around and head home. As she made her way back down the road, the older man was still standing by his gate, and they exchanged nods again. When Stacy returned home, she told her mother about the walk she had just taken and described how beautiful the old part of town was. A few months later, Stacy had the chance to take her mother to see the cottages. However, when they arrived, things had changed. The cobblestones had been replaced by smooth paving. The cottage where the man had been leaning on the gate was now boarded up and appeared nearly abandoned. The row of stone cottages was gone, replaced by 2 semi-detached houses. The circle of flowers and the stable block were no longer there either. At the end of the lane, the 5-bar gate was gone, and where the meadow had been, there was now a row of bungalows. Stacy thought it was impossible for so much development to have occurred in such a short period of time and started to research the history of the area. In her research, she came across an 1830s map of the area and managed to find the village that she had just walked through on that map. So another interaction.
Yeah.
2 in one story, but also the cobblestones again.
Yeah. Back to the same time. It's so weird.
I know. It's a...
I just can't wrap my brain around it. I need to hear the science.
You ready? Because it gets heavy real quick.
Yeah.
So now it's time to get into theories on why Liverpool might be such a hot spot for time slips. I broke this theory into categories and subcategories. If you're like me and love to deep dive, now is the time to pause the episode and get a pen and paper and jot these down to help you make sense of them, because they get a little
crazy,
a little wild.
Okay.
And like for me, I'm able to scroll back up and down. So no biggie. So the 3 main categories are psychological, scientific, and paranormal. I don't say the subcategories right away because I don't want it to get extremely overwhelming, because these are kind of big words and just different concepts that a lot of people don't have to think about normally. So the first category of these is described as psychological. Psychological theories suggest that time slips might be influenced by your mind. So the first psychological theory is called memory reconstruction. Memory reconstruction is the idea that the brain mixes memories with the things around you. So basically it's saying your brain will mix your 5 senses with your memory.
Okay.
So like touch, sight, sound. So for example, you might smell a familiar perfume or hear an old song, and suddenly it's like you're back in a different time, even though you're still here. Yes.
What if you were not alive during that time? How the hell does your brain like, oh yeah, we're back in the 1800s?
Oddly enough, I round back to that a little bit later.
Okay. I'm like, reincarnation is what's going through my brain.
That's a good one. Another thing is memories could be of history books you've read. Memories can be of songs you've heard or a book you've read that takes you back to that time. And a lot of the fantasy books I read, they don't necessarily say, hey, this is the 1900s, but they describe like cobblestone streets and arch, and that's where your brain goes.
Yeah.
Same thing is like, say I went to, like, I do mention this, I went to Scotland and I had watched Outlander, and it helped me have some of the...
You mix those 2 together.
Yeah. So even
but what triggers that? The senses?
Yeah.
Okay.
Your smell of a familiar perfume, or you hear, so that's your smell and your hearing, will take you back to a different time. Like hearing an old song make you think of when you used to dance in the kitchen to that song, or a perfume that you used to wear in high school. Like, you know, you'll randomly put on like your Juicy Couture and you're like, oh my God, I wore this 12 years ago, like something like that. Yeah. So then the second psychological theory is called altered states of consciousness, which is the idea that stress or fatigue could cause a dreamlike experience that may feel real to you. So imagine you've been working long hours all week, burning the midnight oil, barely getting enough rest. By the time Friday rolls around, your body feels heavy, your thoughts are jumbled, and everything just seems a little just off. You sit down on the couch intending to relax, and suddenly you're somewhere else, a vivid, strange place where things don't quite make sense, but feel entirely real. Maybe in this dream you're at work, but your boss has a head of a cat. You snap out of it, startled, and realize you've been sitting there the whole time. It wasn't a dream exactly, but it felt like one. And so that's what...
A lot like a dream.
Yeah, it's almost like daydreaming.
Yeah.
So altered states of consciousness would be tied in simpler terms to daydreaming in a weird way. So now The second category of theories, this category is described as scientific theories. Scientific theories consider time slips as occurrences based on physics or perception of time. The first scientific theory is called Einstein's theory of relativity, which states that time is not fixed and it can behave differently depending on gravity and velocity, which is a little bit about what we kind of talked about.
I like that theory.
Yeah, so I break it down a little bit to kind of help you make sense a little bit of it. So in this theory, since it mentions gravity and velocity, which is gravity and speed, gravity, imagine you're standing near a giant, heavy boulder that's pulling everything toward it. It's so heavy, it even bends the stretchy elastic of time. If you're close to this boulder, time moves slower for you than someone who's further away from it. So if you and your friend synchronized watches and you stood near the boulder while your friend stayed far away, you'd come back to find your friend's watch had ticked ahead of yours. So something so heavy like a black hole, something like that, could cause your perception of time to change. And then speed's role in this theory, now you imagine you're in a super fast spaceship zooming close to the speed of light. When you move that fast, time on your spaceship also stretches, meaning it moves slower compared to someone standing still, which reminds me of the SpongeBob episodes where he's like, do you want to see me do it again?
I was going to say it reminds me of Interstellar. Have you seen that movie?
No.
Oh my God, you need to watch that movie. It's incredible.
Mm-mm.
It's on Netflix right now. It is so good.
Oh no, I'll watch it.
It's about space and time, and it's will blow your mind.
Really?
Yes.
So I have a last part of this, but yeah. Okay, I need to watch that then. So if you spent a year zooming around the universe at light speed and came back to Earth, you might find that years or even decades had passed here while only 1 year passed for you.
Yeah.
In short, time isn't rigid like a clock. It's flexible like a piece of elastic, and it changes depending on where you are and how fast you're moving. That is Einstein's theory of relativity. And I think that kind of explains how we were talking about the running people. That's kind of where my brain went with that.
Okay.
So then the second scientific theory is called the multiverse theory.
This is my favorite theory.
Yeah. So this theory suggests there are multiple timelines or parallel universes. Why did I say it like that? Universes. Time slips could be glimpses into alternate realities temporarily overlapping with our own. Imagine the world is like a big book and each page is a different version of reality. In one story, you choose vanilla ice cream. On another page, you pick chocolate. Each choice creates a new page, and all these pages exist side by side like a stack of books in a library. Now imagine walking through the library when suddenly the two pages of two books overlap for just a moment. You might see a glimpse of a different story, a reality where things happen slightly or wildly different. That's what this theory calls a time slip.
Yes. This is my favorite theory because it, like, to me, it blends with the time relativity
Gravity, yeah.
thing, because I picture like two different timelines going parallel each other on a line. And then at some point they overlap somehow based on speed, gravity, and all those things. And it creates this blip.
Yeah.
And you're there. And then your timeline goes back to where it was. And so you you travel into this other universe for a second, but it's the same time.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no,
like
I
it's
describe
the same,
it.
It's the same time as here versus there on their timeline.
Yeah.
But they just, and that.
I describe this theory in two different ways a little bit later when we round back to one of the stories to make it make sense how you're saying as well. So it's because that theory has two parts of it. It has parallel universe and then it has multiple timelines.
Yeah.
So to me, those are two different things. Yeah. So multiple timelines to me is, which I'll explain a little bit different later. But I do believe, because what you're saying is kind of a mix. What you're saying right now is more parallel universe because you're just walking through your different choices. Yeah. Which is like the Marvel movies. But yes, I come back in one of our...
I could talk about the multiverse theory and parallel universes for forever.
It's so fun. I do describe it differently because I read these theories to you and then I go back to our stories and I explain why I think that. And then I reiterate what that theory was to help you make sense of what I was talking about. Just to kind of... Because I feel like these are hard things to wrap your head around if you've never paid attention to it. And especially if you're just listening, because I am such a visual learner that just listening would be really hard for me as a listener to hear this and be like, oh, okay.
Got it.
Like I'd be like, cool. I just listened. I didn't really think. Yeah. So the third scientific theory is called quantum entanglement. This is the idea that quantum physics explores the idea of interconnected particles across time and space, which could lead to momentary leaks in the time fabric. Which is also gives like Doctor Strange. That's what I think of. I think of Doctor Strange. But if you've never watched any of those movies, then here's a better idea for you. So imagine the universe is like a giant spider web with tiny threads connecting everything. Me, you, the wall, everything. Sound, the spider web connects it all.
Yeah.
So quantum physics is like a curious explorer studying this web and discovering something incredible. Some of these threads connect particles so deeply that they can talk to each other instantly, no matter how far apart they are. Now, picture time as a river flowing smoothly in one direction. What if, just for a moment, some of these special threads in that web poke tiny holes in the river, letting a few drops of water or little glimpses of the past or future spill through? These leaks might let us see how everything in the web is mysteriously tied together across time and space. I really tried to break these down in super simple terms.
No,
I went on to like synonyms and ways to describe this with a synonym.
It's a lot of information.
It is. That's why I was trying to really make it easy.
Yeah.
Because it's hard.
And I went and blended them all together. Sorry.
No, it's okay. No, yours was still, you were still in the multiverse theory. Because you got to think all of these things are describing time slips. So they're all describing the same thing. So realistically, every single one of these theories should be able to tie to any of your stories.
Yeah.
It's just fun to assign the theory based off of parts of it. So the fourth scientific theory is called wormholes, which is basically saying there are hypothetical tunnels through space-time that might allow travel between different points in time. Imagine space-time. Everything around us, including time, is like a giant piece of paper. Normally, if you want to go from one spot to another, you'd have to walk across that paper. But what if you could fold the paper so two spots touch? That would create a shortcut. These shortcuts are called tunnels or wormholes. The idea is that they might let you jump between different places or even times, skipping that long trip. It's like finding a secret passage in a maze that takes you from where you are to straight to the end.
Space scares me.
Yeah. Well, yes. Yeah.
Because
the ocean scares me.
Time in space is like not real.
No.
In my brain.
Well, the ocean scares me. I think it's very interesting, but it terrifies me.
The ocean, I think, controls everything. And aliens live in the ocean. Anyway.
Yeah. I'm like, there's a lot. That's why the ocean scares me. There's just so much going on in that little, not the little, the vast majority of our world.
Right.
But yeah, so wormholes, even whenever you watch anything where they time travel, they always have that like, hole, which is light speed, whatever. But still, yeah, that's kind of what made me think of. So this category is described as paranormal theories. These theories focus on non-scientific, mystical interpretations. The first paranormal theory is called residual energy theory. Some people believe intense emotional or physical events leave energy imprints on the environment, which might momentarily tune in like a recording. Kind of like I already kind of alluded to with the water and the stone. That's what those would be residual.
Yeah.
So some people think that really strong emotions or events, like a big celebration or something scary, leave behind an energy recording in the world around us, like a song etched into a record. Every now and then, it's like someone accidentally tunes into that record. For a moment, they might see, hear, or feel something from the past, as if they're experiencing the leftover echo of what happened long ago. So I kind of go back into it a little bit later with that theory because of how I think it is tied to 1 and 2. But it's basically like the stone is the record and someone randomly touches the stone and they get the full recording of the history.
Yeah.
That's the limestone. Like that's what that is. The limestone and like the water.
Yeah.
And the second paranormal theory is called spiritual or supernatural influence, which is basically saying certain places might have connections to the spirit world where past events can bleed through into the present, allowing witnesses to experience them. Imagine the world is like a thin curtain separating the present from the past, or a spirit world. So basically like a veil. In some places, the curtain might be thinner and bits of the past can peek through. When this happens, it's like seeing a shadow or hearing an echo from another time. People in these spots might feel like they're experiencing moments from the past, almost as if there are two worlds that are briefly touching. So the veil kind of reminds me of like Vampire Diaries when she's like, the veil is thinning. And it's easier to like...
You can get through when it's weak or whatever. I feel like that theory and the water and stone theory of energy go hand in hand too.
Yeah.
And create like a bigger experience based off of like whatever celestial event or traumatic thing or...
I agree. So then the third paranormal theory is time as an illusion, which is basically saying that time is non-linear. A time slip could occur if someone's mind momentarily surpasses the usual flow of time. Imagine time isn't a straight line like a road, but more like a big tangled ball of string where all the moments past, present, and future are jumbled together. Normally we move through time one step at a time, like following the string slowly, but some suggest that your mind might sometimes hop off of the usual path and touch another part of the string. This could lead to you briefly experiencing a moment from the past or future, like skipping around the storybook instead of just reading it in order. So basically you're in this ball, and you start at the beginning of the ball. You're in the center. You're following the string. And then you touch another string, touch that string, and you go somewhere else for a second, and then you get back on your string, which is almost multiverse situation.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's all my theories. So with all these laid out, let's try and place a theory on the story, each story. So story 1 was the man walking to a cafe and ending up on the docks. So for this story, for me, I think it's the paranormal theory, which was the residual energy theory. And that's the theory where big events record, blah, blah, blah. So I think this theory, because of the water in the docks, I think the water recorded a time when the city met one of its greatest plot points, which is when it became a port city. And so I think that's why he saw the docks with ships and they were unloading and workers, because the history of this city is it was established in 1207 as a borough, which is like a city or a town or like a district. But then it became very popular in the 1700s, 1800s for being a port city.
It changed that city's whole footprint in history.
Yeah. And so I think that's where my brain is like, oh, it recorded the moment that these ships started bringing this city life.
Yeah.
And that's how he ended up there with that residual energy.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
And then story 2, it's, I believe, the same residual energy theory. And I think that because of the stones. And so I think they recorded whenever the church was actually like involved in the streetscape. Like it sounds like it wasn't just like on the corner of the road. It sounds like people worked in the churchyard and were moving through the churchyard and were selling, you know, fish and bread and all this stuff on the side of the roads, you know, involving that space.
Yeah.
And so I think the church kind of recorded whenever the city was a lively place. Not the church, the archway or the stones recorded when the church was a central hub.
For the town.
And I think once she walked through the archway, she went back into that.
Yeah. And there was also a graveyard there?
I think so, yes. Churchyard graveyard, yeah.
Yeah.
And they could be hold stuff as well. The third story was the man who was shoplifting and ended up in 1967. For this story, I went with the third scientific theory, which was the quantum entanglement, which is where the universe is like a giant spider web and you can kind of leak through that river and end up picturing places. So I think this theory, because if you remember, as time was changing for him, he could still see it in the distance. And so I think it was like that gap was still open for him to see through that little entanglement river flowing situation. I think there was still that.
Or a thin veil.
Yes, or a thin veil. The fourth story was the police officer, Frank, and he was the one who was trying to find his wife at Waterstones, but ended up at Cripps. For this story, I went with the time as an illusion, which was saying that time is nonlinear. That's the one where you're in the jumbled ball of string, where you're walking your time space, you touch this other time, and then you go back to your time. And that's where I think that's kind of what happened to him. I think he was walking through his time, touched another string, ended up another time, walked back into his time because he was walking to the bookstore. The last 3 stories, which is the young woman shopping at the maternity store, Miss Calloway, the history teacher in the tea room, and Stacy taking her daughter for a walk. I think it's the second scientific theory, the multiverse theory, which is where there's multiple timelines or parallel universes. I did it again, universes. And I kind of think this because they all experience the same time and like they all experience the same location that they were in, just in a different timeline. Yeah. So like Miss Calloway drinking her tea was in her timeline and then, you know, sat in this spot, looked out and just saw a different timeline and then was still in that same like location. And then same thing, the young woman who was shopping at the maternity store was at the same location, but just like saw it in a different time period. Yeah. And then Stacy, the same thing. This is where my theory lines up with yours a little bit. So say you have timeline A and it's going, and parallel to timeline A, there's timeline B. At the midpoint of both timelines, they're the same length. Yeah. At the midpoint, they intersect. Okay. So at the midpoint of both. But to me, timeline A, where they intersect at the midpoint, is 2025. On timeline B, where they intersect, which is also at its midpoint, it's 1923. So that's how I described it, to where it would make a little bit more sense. Yeah. In my brain is parallel universes and the multiverse aligning. That's how my brain kind of thinks of it.
That's how mine jumbles it together too.
Yeah. So say you're like here, or even just perpendicular, but they're the same A, B, but when they intersect, it's just different times. Yeah. But it's the same lines in distance.
But I wonder if like on the other timeline, they are seeing 2025.
Yeah, if like when they interact, like when they walk through that intersection. Yeah. Yeah.
So it's like flip-flopped for each person.
Yeah. That's, you know, none of these stories go ahead of time. Yeah. You know, so that's where it's weird for me. I'm like, I'm sure there are time slip stories where they go ahead of time, but all I really came across was back in time. But yeah, I do wonder. Yeah.
I love the scientific theories.
It's so much fun.
Yeah.
The one last thing I have about these that I already have briefly mentioned is my personal experience was not a time slip, but I could see where if I had been alone, I could have made myself believe it was one, but I was with Aaron. But on our honeymoon, like I mentioned in the Edinburgh episode where I said like, oh my God, there are certain places I could see the history going on around me and certain places I couldn't.
Yeah.
So this is also where I rounded back earlier. You asked a question and I could see whenever I was walking that we went to an old train trestle and then we walked around underneath it and like ended up in the forest. And that's where I was walking around and I was like, oh my God, I can see like the Jacobites and the British soldiers and like, I can see all of this going on around me. Like I could physically, with my eyes open, imagine them sliding down the hill and guns shooting at each other with the gunpowder. Like I could just see the war playing out in front of me so vividly that I think if Aaron wasn't there, I could have believed that it was the theory, like the first psychological theory, which was the memory reconstruction. I could see where I would think that maybe I had encountered a time slip solely off of my memory of the show Outlander and my senses of being
in that
environment.
Yeah.
Yes. And so like I can see where people do that.
Sure.
Yeah. So is there any other theories, thoughts on any of these?
I don't have any other theories. I think for me, the scientific theories make the most sense in my brain just because I have a very scientific mind.
Yeah.
And those make sense to me. And I don't think time is real.
We're all in a simulation.
Yeah. Like that's just like my super nerd, like craziness coming out. But like,
no, I've always thought the whole glitch in the Matrix where they're like, you've never seen your neighbor carrying in groceries. I'm like, you know what? I've never seen my neighbor carrying in groceries, but I know my neighbor has seen me carrying in groceries. Like I know one day I was carrying in groceries and Sydney was walking outside and I was like, see, what is going on here? Like, did the Matrix glitched because we weren't supposed to be able to see that.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
oh yeah, for sure.
I just get off in that stuff.
And like, what are they called?
I need more context than that.
I know. I'm so sorry. Oh my God.
What's the
like the Bernstein Bears?
Shit fire. I know what you're talking about.
You know what I'm talking about?
Mandela effect.
Mandela effect.
Yes.
Those blow my mind.
Because like the Pringle guy, the Monopoly guy,
the cornucopia from Fruit of the Loom.
Yeah, that was there.
That was 100% there.
So was the monocle. The monocle was there.
Yes.
Bernstein.
Bernstein Bears was.
Yeah, EIN.
Mm-hmm. So that is like
that's that
alternative universe, like where your timeline goes off onto another.
Yeah.
And now you're in this timeline and it's actually this.
Yeah, parallel universe.
But you know that it was that.
Yes. To me, that's parallel universe where you're like, that was one change.
Mm-hmm.
And then everything else is different since that.
Right.
But yeah. You have anything else to add before I close this out?
I don't. I am just, because I could talk forever about it.
Well, maybe we can do like a little bonus off that.
Yeah.
So anyways, I'd love to hear everyone's thoughts and ideas on these theories and stories and what you think potentially a time slip could be or what theory you agree with the most, because genuinely like all of these theories could apply to every story because it's all just a theory on how time slips occur and what they are. But I thought it was fun to kind of attach them to each and kind of put them into perspective to help you understand the theories, because they're a lot if you aren't giving good descriptors of them.
Well, yeah. And it's easy for you to be like, oh, that didn't happen. Nope, that didn't happen. But when you hear theories that you can connect to, it's like, okay, well, maybe, I could understand that.
Yeah, I could see where you came from.
Yeah.
So if you are still here and you had fun with all of this, feel free, like I said, to send your stories or comments, concerns, anything to any of our socials or our email at sistersofthestrangepodcast.com and leave an emoji of either a spider web or a clock.
Ooh, or both.
Yeah, or both. Individually.
Yeah.
I'm kidding.
One for one, one for another.
Yes, duh. But thank you for being here. And I think that's all for now.
That's it?
I think so.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks for being here. Thanks for listening. I had really a good time with this one.
Yeah.
Love that.
It's the first time since we've started recording that I don't feel exhausted.
Yeah.
I feel fully functioning right now, which is amazing.
I'm so proud of you.
I know. Normally when we record, I feel like which it's normally a Friday night or a Sunday morning. And both of them, I normally feel like I am out of my wits, and I don't feel that way.
Yay!
I know. Even last week I was struggling, but I'd been up since 2 a.m. So.
Yeah. Well, you were just starting your whole new schedule. But.
Yeah. I actually have been going to bed at like 8:30 to 9:30 at night, and I wake up at 6 a.m. I drink my morning coffee while I do research or watch some YouTube, and then I go to my desk and I work from 8 to 5. And then I completely shut off work. I don't really work on this in the afternoons. Like, I work on this on my lunch break or in the morning. Just making myself, like, tonight, after this, it is 3:30 right now. We're going to end this. I'm going to make sure everything recorded and saved because life hates us sometimes. And then I'm going to go home and I'm going to stop at the grocery store, plug this up, work on it, turn it off at 9 o'clock. I'm making myself. I'm not staying up all night.
Oh, I'm so proud of you.
I'm not doing it.
Routine is everything.
It's made me feel so good.
Yeah. We're feeling good.
I know. I feel good. 2025 is the year.
Yeah. Well, when you hear this, it'll be Tuesday.
Yep.
So happy Tuesday. I hope you guys have a great week, and we will see you next time.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.
Hell yeah, brother.
Woo.